everyone. Welcome back to Espresso with Matt. I am thrilled. I have Jill Huck here, who I've met through New Jersey chapter of ACHE, who's joining me for Espresso with Matt. Jill, welcome aboard. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I've really been looking forward to this, Matt. Thank you for inviting me.
As have I. Now, we have to get the first question out of the gate right off the bat. What's in the coffee cup today? What are we drinking?
Oh, of course. Well, it's definitely coffee. I heard that you had quite a few non-coffee drinkers, which is okay, but now you've come to the right place. Just my good old La Colombe with oat milk. So
Return to normalcy. Thank you. I've had green
mhm.
tea drinkers. I've had hot cocoa, organic coffee. There was a last guest I had drank something called Roma, which to be honest, I had to Google, which is a kind of a coffee-like drink, but good old-fashioned coffee. Myself, I have the old double espresso here, which will get me through the next few hours and
Excellent,
during
excellent.
this
You can't
conversation.
beat it.
Yeah, it's without a doubt my favorite. And, I wasn't much of a coffee drinker in college, and it's weird. I wonder how I got through it. I don't know. I guess I drank a lot of Mountain Dew, which is probably not good for anyone. I only started drinking coffee really 10, 15 years ago, and now if someone asks me, you give up all these things, I think coffee would be one of the last things I
No,
give up.
no,
Yeah,
no, no. I come from a long line of caffeinated people, probably
yes,
overly
yes,
caffeinated people, but so
yeah.
there could be worse vices.
I agree. I agree. And I generally don't trust the decaf drinkers, but we won't let that secret out. Joe, thrilled you're here. I know, first of all, congratulations as a lawyer, which I want to get out of the way also, is you recently became a fellow. Passed
Thank
your
you,
test earlier. I want to talk about that. I mean, amazing
for
accomplishment.
sure.
But Jill, you have such a great background, such a great work experience. Let me tell everyone out there, what it is you do and talk a little about your career progression, if you will.
Sure, sure. Thank you. So thanks for the kind words. I work at Mount Sinai, where I've been for many, many years, and I'm fortunate that the institution has been really a wonderful place to grow my career. It's been really good for me, and good to me. I think what some folks might not know is that I started as an occupational therapist. So my first career out of the gate was very hands-on. It was ancillary clinical, if you want to call it that way. I just always had an interest in healthcare. I was fascinated by hospitals, which I think some of my siblings and family members felt was odd. But I found it a really interesting space. So I started on the clinical side, but I was a really curious individual. I think I still am. I like to know how things work and why decisions are made. So at some point in my career, I went back to NYU Wagner, got my master's in public administration, and then I started a journey that led me to today. So more or less what I've done over the years has a project management basis. I've done strategic planning, clinical program development, work on different relationships and different contractual agreements with partners and outside entities. So it all rolls up into a strategic planning and strategic finance role.
What an amazing career. I mean, I think you're underselling a lot. I know you do a lot of different things we'll get into a little bit. I'm fascinated always by the people who make those switches from those clinical positions who kind of start in a role and then move into administration. Um, Talk a little bit about that because that was kind of my journey too. I started as a direct care
Yeah.
staff member, working as a mental health technician on a psychiatric floor of all things, and end up turning to HR, VP of operations eventually. I don't know when the switch happened for me really that said, hey, I want to do administration. It was more of an organic progression, but for yourself, like you start in that role, in a clinical role, moving into an administrative leadership role. What was that progression like for you? Why do you go that pathway?
Sure, sure. Well, I think it was tough for a couple of reasons. I probably should have been more honest with myself that this is where I was intended to be or where I wanted to be. I enjoyed that role, and there was a lot of meaning there. And I still, think back fondly about the way in which I was able to quite directly touch patient and family lives. But I think that I had hesitations early in my career. And I think it's important to speak candidly about this, about what I could, should, or would be able to do. And I think I played it a little bit safer maybe earlier in my career. So, recognizing that you want to do something different, and in this case, it was still in the industry, is I
Yeah.
think a big step. Whether you're an early, mid, or beyond careerist, recognizing you want to do something different can be challenging. But once you are true to yourself, you can say, well, this is good, but here's really what I want. And that was tricky. That was tricky to come to terms with, and then also to rebrand myself because I was within the same institution.
Yeah, and it's funny. I always kind of tell those metaphors like when you move those roles, you go from the clinical role to an administrative role. It's kind of like you're that new kid at high school. What lunch table am I sitting at right now?
Right.
You know,
Yeah, it's a good analogy.
it's one of those things. Like
Right.
I remember going from direct care into a administrative role, and my first administrative role was activities coordinator of all things. Love that job. By the way, it might be a job I want to go back to at some point because I got to play with kids and go on camping trips all the time. But that being said, that switch was different, right? Not only the
Yeah.
schedules and the work environment, but that move from that clinical area to leadership, especially in healthcare, is just so important. But I will say this: one of the things that I've noticed a lot of leaders have, they have a clinical background on some way, and it helps kind of guide them.
Mm-hmm.
So does that experience kind of help you as you're working on your plan and as you're working on your administrative projects like that? Do you ever real go back to those times and say, here's what it meant for me back then? And does that help you guide your decision making?
Yeah, for sure. I think it definitely lends credibility. If nothing else, you speak a certain language and you have jargon or lexicon, if you will, that speaks to the clinical language, and that's helpful. I think it's more in some circles than others. I think there's a certain appreciation that I try to keep with me for what it's like for those folks on the front lines. I was never a nurse, and I was never a physician or a surgeon, and those are tough jobs. But I did work on traumatic brain injury and traumatic spinal cord for a number of years, and those were pretty tough roles. And it's physically and emotionally heavy work. So trying to keep that in mind when we're asking our clinicians to do certain things, just hearing them. Now it may be the direction that we ultimately need to go, but letting someone know that you appreciate and you're listening to the challenges of their roles is something I try to keep with me.
I love that fact. It's that empathy, it's that understanding of that
Mhm.
job. I tell this story sometimes. It's kind of a joke, but really was my journey. As I moved into positions, I always kind of looked at the next position saying, well, that job can't be as hard as the job I'm doing now. So I'm working direct care, working every weekend. If I moved to this administrative role, then I realized the administrative team works pretty hard. Became
Mhm.
a supervisor. Wow, that job was pretty hard. I started thinking to myself, well, HR, I'll put on HR. That looks like an easy role. Maybe it'll help me. I kind of get out. It wasn't. Well, the only difference, I think you hit it right on the head, was that physically and emotionally challenging role. Where I got into
Mhm.
more leadership roles, it wasn't as physically demanding. I'm on my feet. I'm not walking around.
Right.
I don't think, but that emotional challenge was there from
Mhm.
in healthcare. I got to tell you, I think healthcare leadership, especially, you have such an emotionally draining
Yeah.
environment. You might not be on the floors, but those impacts of people, family, that mission-driven approach is so much
Mhm.
there. It's so important that you talk about that. You talk about that experience. I think that makes you such a great leader in the field and such a great leader in healthcare. It's a wonderful point, a wonderful part of your journey.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little about your big news. So we talked a little about this because you kind of have gone to a pathway that I myself might be starting down the roads in the next few months.
Great.
You did get your fellowship.
I
So talk
did.
about that. That was a great investment in your growth. Talk about that fellowship and what that means.
Yeah, yeah. So for any listeners that aren't familiar, I've recently attained the certification fellow of the American College of Healthcare Executives. And that comes through ACHE, which is the national organization that I guess administers this credential for those that are able to meet the criteria and then pass what I think is a challenging exam. So I had it on my mind for some time. I I guess I'm the type that can't sort of sit still, if you will. I have to kind of be working towards something. And so it was on my mind for a while, particularly when I joined the board in New Jersey. I work for Mount Sinai, as you know, but I do live in New Jersey. And so it's much easier for me to dial into the Jersey chapter. And when I joined the Jersey chapter and expanded my network, which I'd love to talk about as well, I love to talk about networking. There were a lot of folks with that credential, and I came to meet others and become more interested in it. So fast forward, for me, I was far enough into my career that I was able to meet most of the criteria. It was the professional education credits that I had to go after, and then the studying, and that was challenging for I think anyone who works or hasn't taken a test in a long time, or is a parent or a caregiver of any sort, to carve out that time. That was the hardest thing. But
Yeah.
I've told people that if it's important to you, you'll do it somehow.
Well, yeah, someone showed me the flashcards the other day. They came in like a big old
It's like
box.
a
I'm not sure.
brick.
Yeah, like and so it's all areas of running healthcare, and for anyone who's in healthcare will tell you healthcare is the most regulated industry
Mhm.
out there, and all the scope of knowledge you have to go through. I mean, this is an impressive achievement, and I think you highlight, your work and full-time family, friend, all those things you're balancing. It is tough as an adult learner to fit the time
Yeah, it
in.
was hard.
You have the benefit of the acknowledgement of a skill set, of experience, of learning how to study. You don't necessarily have the time. I remember when I went for my master's degree, my last paper, I kind of turned into like Jack Nicholson from The Shining. I was like, all work, no play makes a Matt dull boy. I couldn't like get the paper done because it was like just I was reaching my capacity. It was so hard. I had to take a little breath and go for a little drive and come back and finish that last paragraph or two. Just really got me, and so it's such a challenge. And what a great credential to get to and earn. And it's going to be great for you as you advance your career moving forward.
Appreciate
And
that.
I want to talk a little about today, Jill, because you and I have met in networking events, and
Hmm.
I just joined um, ACHA last year. I've been in healthcare leadership for over 50, 20 years of my career, but always wanted to join, had the opportunity to join last year. And I mean, you started talking at one of those events last year about, networking and how to network with people. And I was just so impressed watching you, how you network and know everyone and kind of join different groups and join different conversations. And you used this term earlier, early, mid, advanced careerist, where you are in your career, and what an important skill set. So, talk a little bit about how you developed your networking, your own personal brand. How did that help you throughout your career?
Sure, sure. Well, I'm so glad that we came to meet at the event, and I think birds of a feather, the saying, right? So fellow extroverts tend to be magnetized towards one another. Um, yeah, I came to ACAG New Jersey around the time of the pandemic. I have been living in Jersey for over 10 years, and I think it was that desire to connect with people, and to just have that kinship, which those of us that are social, extrovert, team oriented individuals really thrive with. So joined the organization and found a lot of value there, and was able to expand my network tremendously. I had not put as intent a focus on networking. I had sort of a light focus, but I think like many others who have concerns about networking, or they're hesitant, or should I reach out? I had to get over that hump a little bit, and it's been well worth it. And my network has grown in such meaningful ways that I'm always encouraging folks to join the organization, but don't just join, come be part of it, because that's where you get the value. It's not something that you just pay the receipt for and it's on paper. You have to be there to get value.
Well, Jill, can we talk a little bit more about, you talked a little bit about this idea of what held you back in networking. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to use a word you didn't use, but I'm going to use the word fear. There's
Mm-hmm.
that social anxiety we all have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of I'm going to go to an event. I don't know anyone. How do I meet anyone? This goes back to when we were kindergartners and who's going to play with us in the sandbox. I mean, this is a real, true thing. What was that for you? And how did you kind of manage that, get through that, and kind of be able to go into a room and meet strangers, talk with them, and have that kinship develop? How did you kind of develop that skill, and how did you get past that concern you had? That's natural for all of us.
Sure, sure. I think that fear plays out in different ways for different people, right? So you've got a group that just maybe you're more introverted, you're shy, whatever word you want to use, and it's hard for you to sort of go up to someone and strike up that conversation, right? You're not sure sort of how to approach it. And for those folks, I would say the other person is they're only in one or two positions. Either they're in the same position as you, so they'll be empathetic to that, or they're like me who just would talk to anyone on the street and they'll be delighted to have a conversation with you. So it's kind of a win-win situation if you frame it that way. You're either going to find someone in your position or find someone who is just more than willing to chat. So I think it's a reframing.
Yeah.
People are there for the same reason. That's sort of your first type of concern. I think another concern or stumbling block that people have is sort of this humility of feeling like or being too humble, feeling, well, who's going to want to talk to me, and I don't know if this person's really want to talk to me. They're more senior. But again, people come out from the office and they come out to these events and they associate with professional organizations to do that. So just by showing up, those folks are demonstrating, yes, I might be a director, a vice president, what have you, but I'm here because I want to network with my colleagues, right? So there are a couple of different iterations of how this plays out, and I think there's a solution.
That's great advice. And I was actually talking to someone who self-described herself as a young careerist, which I gotta tell you, I never describe myself as a careerist, but they describe themselves as
I think
young
it's a new
careerists.
term. It's a
It's a new
buzzword.
term, right? And but what she was saying to me was she was at this speed networking event we went to for ACHA, which we missed the at last time. It was a
Mm,
wonderful event, and it was great because we were networking with all different levels of leadership and very
hmm
high level C-suite
hmm
leaders. And um talking with her after the event, and she said to me, "I didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't feel like what to say." And I said, well, I said, first thing I came to realize as I started meeting with more leaders and getting into people who work in the executive suite or doctors is really kind of like that Wizard of Oz moment that, behind the curtain, there's no grand wizard.
Yeah, it's
These
just a
are these are
human.
these are people who have great jobs, great roles, and many of them, the truth is, many of them want to mentor others or want
hmm
to give knowledge
hmm
back. And especially if they were there, it's a great point. If they're there putting themselves out for networking events, they want to meet people. So I think that's that first thing is kind of that idea that, wherever you are in your career, your growth, be okay with just talking
hmm
with people, having those human conversations. And it's absolutely a skill you can build. And Joe, I really appreciate what you said there, how it's different for everyone. And
hmm
for me, like I tell you, like that first event walking in August, I knew no one in the room, but I quickly knew people because we had shared experience. We worked in healthcare, leadership. We knew what we were managing there, and
Sure.
it's a great connection there. So I think it's a wonderful skill, and I'm glad you brought it up and wanted to talk about that too. I think because it's such an important skill you need as a senior leader. How does it
Absolutely.
you in your daily work? I mean, not only just networking at ACHE, but how do you use your network working every day? How do you manage that?
Oh, sure. Well, I have the benefit of having been at Mount Sinai for a long time. And so at Mount Sinai, I'm able to use the network that I have to tap into other subject matter experts, other leaders across the institution. And I talk to my team about this a lot. In my case, in particular, though, I've been with the institution for many, many years. I've worked at a lot of different parts. We are a multi-hospital system. Of course, we have corporate, and so having worked at two of the hospitals plus corporate, plus an LLC grant division, I know people in different facets of the organization. And maintaining those relationships and being able to reach out to people in your network is so important. So I'm always telling my team, call so and so, email so and so, back at the other department you worked for, find someone you have a relationship with, call them and just say, hey, I want to pick your brain about something. I've done that many, many times. And people are more than willing to say, yeah, I know about this process in the operating room. I can tell you about this new HR policy. People want to help. It's rare that people don't want to help. So I think using the network in that way is extremely beneficial. And I also really like to use my network in my community. I serve on a small non-for-profit board in the community for an organization that is important to me. And I like to make connections just in my life. They were looking for a new teacher. It happens to be a school. I have a friend who is a teacher, and you make introductions, you connect people, and you never know what might happen, usually good things.
It's awesome advice. And it's funny because one of the things I developed over my career, I was in HR, was competency kind of assessments for leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And I read about this for a while, and what really came clear is a true competency for almost every leader. That 90-day, that first year kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's interested in when you hire a leader, how they working out. The biggest thing I found was the best indicator of success was after that 90 days to 6 months, did they have connections?
Mm,
And in the organization, did they know who to connect with? Were they connected with people? Did they know how to get answers and know were they
mm-hmm.
reaching out to people in their network? I found if I looked at someone after 90 days or a few months and they were really not connected with other leaders and other departments and both internally, externally, that was usually a really bad sign for leaders. Um, and so I think it's such a competency you have to have in leadership.
Yeah.
And it goes from I've seen the most innovative leaders and to the most outgoing people.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, there's different ways of doing that. But I think what you're describing, Jill, is such a clear leadership competency, being able to connect with others and get to know where the answers are. Um, and so I'm glad you bring that up because I think for anyone, we have a lot of leaders watch this show and are curious about that. I think that's such a competency to work on it. And if you're evaluating leaders too, focusing on those connections. Because I worry about the leader who's not connected with anyone. And I wanted to just kind of change the subject a little bit, but talk a little bit about my journey. You know, I got so busy at work that I stopped networking. I
Mm-hmm.
just it was kind of to me at some point in my career it became not something I'm doing because I don't have time for it. I have work to do.
Mm-hmm.
And what really happened was I'm going against exactly what I'm saying. Like it became something I didn't have a challenge. I had a challenge to actually network outside my normal scope. I've been really a proponent now of that. It's absolutely something you have to do. How do you find the time? Is a basic question. As a leader, to find the time to network, to get out there and do this type of events with everything else you got going on. How do you balance that?
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, again, I think you go through different sort of seasons in your life and in your career. And I'll tell you, as I've told the folks that report to me or work with me, you have to make time, particularly if it's something that is not a passion of yours. And as I said earlier, I'm an extrovert. I like to connect with people. It's not going to come as easy for everyone. But on my calendar, I probably talk to 2 to 3 people a week. And I've sort of come up with this mantra that you need to always have someone on your list. Who's that person that
Yeah.
I need to get back to Matt? I need to get back to so and so. I need to reach out to so and so. I just had a conversation a few hours ago this morning with someone that I hadn't connected with in a number of years that had reached out to me over LinkedIn. So I always make time for people. I hope that people will make time for me, and I find that people do because people are generally good humans. But if it's important to you, you'll do it. It's just like the FACHE. If it's important to you, have a network, you'll dedicate the time. You'll find the time.
Great advice there. I mean, really is. It's something you have to work on, and now there's more modern tools out there. So you mentioned LinkedIn, which
Mm-hmm.
really, quite frankly, I didn't spend a ton of time dealing with my LinkedIn profile. A few years ago, someone said to me, "Matt, you got to work on your LinkedIn profile if you're going to be an executive." I'm like, "I got work. I got time for that." I'm finding new ways to connect people. Like I'm gonna tell you right now,
Yes.
2 years, 2 years ago, if someone said to you, "Hey Matt, you're gonna be doing video interview chats and put them on YouTube," I'd be like, "Yeah, right." 'Cause it just wasn't part of what I thought I would be doing. But at the core of it, I've always liked talking to people. I always enjoy getting new ideas and
Mm-hmm.
amplifying those ideas.
Mm-hmm.
You're hearing about that. There's new ways to connect now. And one of the things I think is so important, Jill, and you brought up a great point, is it's not about, hey, I have 1,000 followers or I have 10,000
Right.
connections. It's not like these Instagram, social media stats.
Mm-mm.
Really for leadership, it's about the value of the connection there and using these connections to kind of get some depth. Even if you don't talk to people for months or years, you have in-depth conversations. And I love the fact that not only you find time to connect, Jill, but you also find value for yourself and others. And it's much more than just check the box thing. It's a genuine opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
learn. Is that how you approach it, or is that the way you look at it?
Yeah, I mean, that's generally the whole purpose. The purpose is not, as you said, to have the most connections. Some of us have more than others, but they have to be meaningful and they have to be cultivated, right? So if you care about staying in contact with someone, you will. And sometimes time goes by and we haven't talked to someone in quite some time. That was the case today. But if your relationship and your brand is strong, then that connection is going to flourish again real quickly, right? So it goes back to sort of how you treat people and what the relationship was, even if you've only met once or twice. Did you develop a genuine connection? Were you authentic? Were you genuine? Did you offer to assist that person if you're asking them to assist you? That's sort of the exchange here. It's a two-way exchange. It's not a one-way street. And I think when you approach it that way, then it's going to be really easy to call someone up and say, "Hey, it's been years, but I've got a question, or I see this role that's come up. Can we talk?" And people will.
So, and I thank you so much for joining me and talking about these ideas because, you
I love
know,
it.
I think it's such an important topic out there of how networking and I'm just a big proponent of that and also having that authentic conversation, like genuinely being interested in people. I think your story and your career progression is absolutely fascinating. You have so much,
Thank you.
really awesome accomplishments that, we could have a whole other episode on that. Before we get to the espresso round questions, which everyone's excited about,
Sure.
of course, um, what's next? Where are you kind of taking this networking, your career progression? What's on some of your goals as you move on from there? What are you looking to do with your career in healthcare?
Oh, good question, because it's important to have goals. And I know that you and I share some colleagues in the industry that are really focused on helping individuals put those goals into action. So, yeah, so the FACHE was a big one. And now that that's done, I'm back to focusing on growing my ability to have more impact and influence in my role, whether that's at my organization or elsewhere, being able to influence at a higher or broader level and make those strategic plans and bring those plans to life. So continuing up the ladder in my own role. Secondly, I've always wanted to teach. I've had an interest in that, and I've been sort of knocking at those doors. I just think I would enjoy that. I was a preceptor for many years during my time at Mount Sinai Morningside for the fellowship program. And I designed the fellowship program. I supervised 3 or 4 classes of fellows, and I just got tremendous meaning out of that experience. So that's another road I'd like to go down. And then we'll see.
Yeah,
I'm incredibly impressed with folks like kind of going back to what you said about making videos and interviewing people, sort of cultivating your brand. There's a lot of folks that I know that have pivoted, left their jobs, started their own business. I have a lot of colleagues that have done that. I'm incredibly proud of them. And I think it takes a lot of guts. So if I follow my own advice, maybe I'll grow the same guts.
well, a few things. First of all, you amplify your influence as you grow your network as you move up in organizations, and I'm absolutely confident you're continue doing that, both in your role for ACHA and making a difference at the end of the day. I mean, I think you're
Thank you.
passion from where you started as in a clinical position through healthcare through all your years. It's just going to continue to be amplified. If I'm a college right now, I'm not sure why I'm not calling you right now for a professor. So just to put it out there because you did a master class on how to network, and so you go from there. So absolutely hope you go from there, and pivoting and try new things. I think sometimes don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. Sometimes you just jump in,
Exactly.
you figure it out a little bit, and you make the mistakes as you go on. You go from there. Um, Jill,
You're
what
doing
a
it.
wonderful, wonderful discussion. Okay, everyone's favorite questions now. We got the espresso round.
The lightning
Um,
round.
yes, yes. So first question: what is the best piece of advice you ever got over a cup of coffee?
I don't remember if there was coffee here, but bear with me. The best piece of advice was not when you're looking for a role, you're looking for a new role, you cannot possibly know or speculate what's happening on the other side of the table. And at this time in my life, I think I was just out of graduate school, looking for new roles, trying to advance my career. And you start to speculate, what are they thinking? And are they going to call me back? And what might be happening? And your minds can really run away with you. But you really have no way of knowing what's going on. And it could be any number of things that are not about you. And that one was really stuck with me because I think we can often be critical of ourselves and think, gosh, well, they must have gone a different direction. They don't like me. They're not going to call me back. Sometimes it's not you. There are a million and one reasons that things may not be going your way. Don't take it personal.
Absolutely. I used to run groups for adolescents in behavioral health. And one of the great mentors I had, she told me, she was, Matt, if you run a great group and the kids love it, say, hey, what a great clinician you are. You did an amazing job. If it goes terribly, just blame the kids. And I thought that was just a wonderful advice to protect my own ego. But it's so true though. I've been on the other side of those conversations as a hiring manager, and we're
Mm-hmm.
about to make an offer to the candidate, and the budget gets pulled, and it
Yep.
happens.
They've
It's
reorged
not always,
something.
yeah, and unfortunately, there's just a lot of that going on in every industry right now, and especially in healthcare. It's a very challenging time
And people
to
take it
hire.
personally, and you can't.
It's tough not to, but I think it's also important that you have some, just some self, awareness that you're still valuable, even if it doesn't, if the rejection letter comes through. And it's a great advice. You can go back, talk to a younger Jill, and give advice over a cup of coffee. What advice are you giving yourself?
I think I would remind myself that only you define you, that others can't define you. I think the early careerist or younger me was seeking that approval from boss, from supervisor, manager, and that's good. You should want to deliver and deliver at a top level to the person that you work for. But relationships sometimes are fantastic, and other times they're a little bit rockier. But only you can define you. Whether it's your self worth, your self esteem, or where you're going to go in your career. You choose that path. Someone else doesn't define you and doesn't choose that for you.
Great advice, amazing advice. I think the same clinician told me one time, self-esteem isn't what you think about yourself. It's not what I think about you. It's what you think I think about you. And this idea that we sometimes define ourselves with a mirror of other people, and we have to have our
Yeah.
own value system first. That's such great advice. And a really important thing to everyone's mental wellness is that your values are
Mm-hmm.
consistent. Your self-worth is there. And it's great advice because healthcare leadership is a tough field.
It
Tough
is.
field.
You gotta have a
And
thick skin. That was another piece of advice I got.
oh my God, yeah, you do. And because the pressures from all direction. That's
Mm-hmm.
amazing advice. Final espresso round question. Have a cup of coffee anywhere, anytime, any place with anyone. Who are you having that cup of coffee with?
That was a tough one. There's a lot of good candidates, but someone popped into mind, and that was Michelle Obama. Because I mean, there's so many reasons.
Yeah,
Female leader. I mean, so much dignity, so much passion, so much compassion. Um, And I look for people that model the right behavior, right? For young women, really for our nation, but particularly for young women. And I have a daughter who's 10, and I try to expose her, let's say, I don't want to steer, but expose her to folks that I think are walking the walk and talking the talk in a way that I can respect. And she's written a couple of great books. If you haven't read her books, but just a tremendous leader. So that's who it would
That would be
be.
an amazing conversation. I would buy a ticket for that conversation, Jill. That would be an amazing one. I will say this, and not to embarrass you, but your your daughter has a great female role model in you.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
and
I'm trying.
yeah, we all do as parents, and but I think that's just an amazing advice. Well, Jill, I really want to thank you for joining Espresso with Matt today. This was an
Thank you.
amazing view of networking, the power of networking, your
Mhm.
leadership journey, how to be career-minded and focus on everything else. You really did a great job discussing those topics. I couldn't
Thank
have asked
you.
for anything more. Jill, if anyone wants to reach out to you with your LinkedIn page, is that the best way to get you?
Please.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
sure. I don't know if you want to put it in the chat or how you want to
We
do
will.
that, but feel free
It,
to post that. I'm happy to. It really does give me pleasure to be able to connect people and to serve and help people along their journey. And this has
if
been a
you're in
lot of
health,
fun.
if you're in healthcare, look into American College Healthcare Executive. If you want to get into leadership, join us at our next event. It's an amazing opportunity to join a great network. Jill,
Please
thank you
do.
so much. Really appreciate it. You have a great day. Everyone, till we have the next cup. See you soon.
Cheers.